For the first time in my life, I'll be painting with expensive watercolors. I decided I was going to paint the same eye as I painted with kids' watercolors, but with a twist. So if you've been around on my channel for some time, you'll know that I started painting with watercolors recently, but I've been using kids' watercolors for, various reasons. But guess what? Everything changed. My art mentor just a week ago or something gave me a whole bunch of artist grade watercolors just to play around with. She's amazing. Shout out to Sue. So I started off with making color swatches, and the first thing off the bat that I noticed about these watercolors was that a little pigment goes a long way. All I did was dip the tip of my brush into the caps of these things, and it was more than enough to fill in the entire swatch. I'm adding more water to the pigment as I go, just to make it lighter, because I want to see how the pigment looks in its most saturated form and in its most lightest form. For some time, I've been feeling a bit uninspired, and I wasn't painting or doing much art because I felt overwhelmed with just the amount of work I had to do, and I don't know, it was just completely pressing on me at that moment, and just seeing how bright these pigments were really gave me this inspiration, and I felt excited about something for the first time in a long time. After the color swatches were completed, I decided which colors I officially wanted to put in my watercolor palette, and after that, it was just a matter of squishing watercolor tubes, which was a lot harder than it should have been. I then took a clean toothpick and spread out the pigment in each of the pans so that it would be all nice and even. Alright, on to the painting. I'm starting off with a sketch, and I'm using the same reference photo as I did for the first eye, so I can better see the differences between kids' watercolors and these artist grade watercolors. Honestly, I felt pretty intimidated to start because, it's like starting. It's starting. I kind of waited maybe 24 hours before I started painting because I wanted to kind of figure things out in my mind. I was also afraid of, messing up that sketchbook page because I was pretty proud of how the eye and the sunset thing turned out, and I was just avoiding the entire thing. But then I just sat down with myself and I'm like, Adar, you just get it over with, okay? It's fine. It's fine. If you mess it up, okay, fine, you messed it up. It's okay. It's a sketchbook page. If you can't be comfortable in your own sketchbook, where are you gonna be comfortable? So, yes, I sat myself down, and I'm so glad I did, So I started out with adding a light wash color and focusing on where the shadows on my reference were. And then after some time of doing that, I kind of went into the zone and kind of detached myself. When I paint, it takes some time for me to completely forget everything around me. And when that happens, I don't know, it's just my mind works on its own. I wouldn't be able to tell you if I mixed any colors or what colors exactly I used because I have no idea myself. So it's very interesting for me now to look at my footage and see what I did in what order because I don't remember. I'm a beginner watercolor artist, and so this eye will be my fourth watercolor piece. I watched a bunch of videos on watercolors, and I wanted to kind of switch up my technique on this eye, so I decided to experiment and try painting the skin using a wet on dry technique. Before, I was using a wet on wet technique, and my eye had this sort of blotchy effect, and I kind of like how that turned out, but at the same time I wanted to have more control over where my watercolors are going, and I wasn't satisfied with just, the complete go with the flow sort of mentality that I had to have when painting the previous eye. So after I sort of finished painting the skin, I decided to give it a rest for about 24 hours, 12 hours, and I gave it some thought to where I wanted to take this eye painting. Did I want to finish it on a more realistic note, or did I want to allow myself more creative freedom? So I thought really hard, and then I came up with a really nice idea. So I created a concept sketch which kind of looks like a bunch of scribbles but makes a ton of sense to me. And I started. For the iris, I used a wet on wet technique. And I'm using pigments straight out of the pan. I'm not mixing them. And so I think the colors that I'm using are Winsor & Newton Green Blue Shade, Winsor & Newton Indigo, and Winsor & Newton Orange, and Winsor & Newton Yellow. I decided to give myself creative freedom. I wanted to portray that there is so much going on in our minds, but it's only our eyes, the iris of our eyes, that give a hint to what is going on inside. I didn't think of painting skin with the wet on dry technique earlier because I thought there would be a bunch of hard edges, and I wasn't exactly sure how to get those soft edges. But so I did a bunch of surfing on YouTube, and I found this artist, Kellogg's Loops, this YouTube channel, and I was so mesmerized by just how smooth he painted his skin. He uses a clean, wet paintbrush to blend out his colors, so I decided to give that a try, and I think I really like how this technique turned out. I'm gonna definitely use it again in the future. Also, another thing I found that helped me not get a blotchy sort of effect was that in between, whenever I dipped my paintbrush into my water cup, I dabbed it on a wet paper towel before I applied the color onto the paper. Sometimes I forgot to do this and I had to just dab it out with a paper towel. I didn't do this before, and you can definitely tell. And so with all the colors and all the splashes and stuff, I wanted to paint the beauty and the chaos of what goes on in our minds. And truthfully, I was afraid of messing up at this point because, you know, it's a risk. I'm very grateful to myself, so cheers to myself, that I went through with it. And I'm very satisfied with how it turned out. By using these splashes and drips, I'm really giving myself over to the more uncontrolled side of the watercolor medium. And it really was a journey. It was a journey. Another thing that I discovered that I liked about watercolors was the permanency, yet the flexibility you have with the medium. If you don't like how something turned out, you can just simply put water on it and pick it up with the paper towel. I can definitely feel a difference between these watercolors and kids' watercolors. These artist-grade watercolors are just so much easier to work with. The pigments are so bright and beautiful, and I started to incredibly enjoy the process. I became so brave that I was just putting pigments on, I was playing around with it, letting them bleed into each other. Personally, I think that yes, kids' watercolors are a great place to start. However, if you're really starting to get serious about your watercolor art journey, then you won't regret taking the leap and buying more expensive watercolors. If you are a beginning watercolor artist like I am, I would love to hear from you in the comments what inspired you to start painting with watercolors and what you think about the medium so far. If you are a more experienced watercolor artist, I appreciate your time, and I'm open to tips and pointers, so feel free to comment down below. I painted the roses using pure cadmium red, and I think that roses are so pure and beautiful, but at the same time, they have thorns. I've been trying to find ways to incorporate art and making art into my daily routine, and for the past week or so, I've been trying to wake up early, as in like 5-6 a.m. to paint, to draw, to edit my videos, and, you know, just do some art. And I'm a late sort of sleeper. I like sleeping in and stuff, and so it's been, you know, a struggle. At this point, I realized that I didn't like where I put one of the roses on the painting. I thought it threw off the balance, so I just simply erased it. I went to class on one of the days that I woke up early and painted, and my teacher's like, "Oh, Adar, it's so nice that you're smiling again." And I'm like, I'm like, really? I wasn't smiling before? And she goes, no, you were very, very serious and down. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, yeah, and I also personally notice a change. I'm more lighthearted. I feel like more accomplished when I paint in the mornings. So I think that painting eyelashes is the most rewarding yet hard and nerve-wracking part of painting an eye. For the eyelashes, I'm just using pure, pigment, just dark purple, and I'm just flicking my wrist and stuff. I'm trying, I don't know if you can see her, I'm just like shaking internally because one little drop here, one little drop there, that's, one unwanted drop, and the whole thing is done. So intense, right? In my previous watercolor pieces, I used a white ballpoint pen for the highlights, but this time I decided to, take another leap, and I was using this metallic gouache, so that was definitely something different. This was such a rewarding project. It really taught me just the importance of taking risks and that it's okay to try something new. It's okay to take a risk, I think by now I've fallen in love with watercolors.